Most leaders think recovery is what happens after performance, after the quarter closes, after the crisis resolves, after the promotion, the acquisition, the election cycle. But elite leaders know something different. Recovery is not a reward, it is infrastructure. Just like governance, capital allocation, and risk management, recovery determines whether leadership capacity holds under pressure or collapses quietly over time. Today, we're breaking down why recovery is not self-care, not softness, and not optional, but a strategic leadership system. This is week 4 of our Leadership Longevity series, and this episode is about building leaders who can think clearly, decide wisely, and lead sustainably. Welcome to the Longevity Unlocked podcast. I'm Nurse Sherrie, your host and executive longevity and high performance strategist. This is where executive performance, longevity, strategy, and evidence-based leadership intersect without hype, without wellness theater, and without sacrificing credibility. Let's get into it. Leaders operating without adequate recovery show measurable declines in decision quality, emotional regulation, and strategic foresight. What's dangerous is that they rarely perceive the decline themselves. The higher the position, the least feedback they receive, and the greater the risk. Sleep and cognitive performance research shows that chronic sleep restriction produces impairments equivalent to alcohol intoxication without the subjective feeling of impairment. In leadership terms, you feel fine, but judgment, reaction time, and risk assessment are degraded. This is how smart leaders make preventable mistakes. A case study on a Fortune 500 executive team showed they were consistently missing early risk indicators, not because of incompetence, but because recovery was informal and inconsistent. Once recovery became structured, protected sleep windows, reduced cognitive load, and intentional decompression, risk detection improved within 1 quarter. I've personally sat across from leaders who were shocked when their performance rebounded, not from working harder, but from restoring sleep and nervous system regulation. They didn't gain new skills. They regained access to the ones they already had. Chronic stress without recovery increases emotional reactivity and reduces impulse control. That means shorter tempers, poorer listening, and faster escalation. Not personality flaws, physiology. Neuroscience research shows prolonged stress reduces activity in the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain that's responsible for executive judgment, emotional regulation, and long-term planning. Stress shifts leadership from strategy to survival. There was a noted case study on a senior public sector leader who operated in continuous crisis mode. Staff morale had declined, turnover rose, and communication was fractured. Once recovery was formalized, emotional stability returned, and team trust was rebuilt. I've personally worked with leaders who believed emotional volatility was just part of the job. What they discovered was that nervous system regulation, not resilience, was the missing infrastructure. Recovery improves cognitive flexibility. That's the ability to adapt, innovate, and reframe problems. Without it, leaders default to familiar strategies, even when conditions change. Studies show that intentional recovery periods improve creativity, problem solving, and pattern recognition. This isn't rest, it's strategic neurological reset. There was a tech founder, let's call him Bill. He stalled creatively after rapid growth. His innovation slowed, not because of market saturation, but because mental fatigue eliminated cognitive flexibility. Recovery restored his creativity, and revenue soon followed. I've seen leaders regain vision not through brainstorming sessions, but through structured recovery that allowed their brains to think again. Inflammation from chronic stress affects mood, motivation, and mental clarity. Leaders often interpret this as loss of drive when it's actually biological overload. Medical research links chronic stress-related inflammation with brain fog, irritability, and reduced executive function. You cannot outdiscipline inflammation. A CFO, Sarah, who had flawless metrics, struggled privately with irritability and fatigue. Recovery protocols were instituted that reduced her inflammation and restored her executive presence. I've watched leaders blame themselves for symptoms that were actually signals that their systems were overdue for some rest and recovery. Leaders set the nervous system tone for their organizations. Stress is contagious, but so is regulation. Organizational psychology research confirms that leadership stress patterns are mirrored by teams. This stress pattern affects teams' engagement, performance, and retention. An executive team normalized exhaustion. Once recovery became a part of their leadership infrastructure, engagement increased and internal conflict decreased. I've learned this repeatedly. When leaders recover well, organizations stabilize. Let's talk about the system I use. It's the Executive Recovery Infrastructure, the ERIC framework. E, establish protection, non-negotiable sleep consistency, protected thinking time, meeting boundaries. R, regulate daily, nervous system downshifts, transition rituals between decisions. I, intentionally restore, movement for recovery, not punishment, nutrition that reduces inflammation. And C, continuously audit, weekly executive capacity reviews, decision fatigue assessments, and energy tracking, because recovery then becomes operational and not emotional. If this episode resonated, here's your next step. Download the Executive Capacity Audit. This is a diagnostic tool that helps you identify recovery gaps, cognitive overload, and leadership sustainability risk. And if you're responsible for performance at scale, book a corporate wellness or longevity strategy call. All links are in the show notes. If this episode added value, please like, share, and subscribe, and share this with a leader who needs this. Follow me on all platforms at Ask Nurse Sherrie and on X at Ask Sherrie RN, because leadership isn't just about output, it's about capacity that lasts.